This week on New to You, Tearjerkers Pt2, Amy Poehler's Yes Please. Hey everybody, welcome to the New to You show. We are a discussion podcast where we discussion things. I'm one of your hosts, John Holt. With me is...
Mary Varn.
And...
Julian Cage.
All right, welcome everybody. Welcome back, Mary.
Thanks. Was I not supposed to go second because I'm a guest and not a host?
No, you can go second all you want.
Oh man, discussing things sure makes me thirsty.
Yeah.
Why don't we talk by the water cooler?
Mary, your pick is up this week. Last week we talked about Jules's documentary about the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, White Flash, Black Rain, available on HBO and other platforms.
So this week the water cooler is filled with my tears.
Salty. Mary, you're up. Let's go right into your pick.
I can't take no trying to make you smile. It's me.
I say sorry a lot. When I'm running late, when I'm navigating the streets of New York, when I interrupt someone, I say sorry, sorry, sorry in one long stream, and the sentence becomes sorry, 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 and it's said really fast, as if even the act of apologizing is something to apologize for.
So my pick is Yes Please, Amy Poehler's memoir that came out in 2014. And I listened to this book via Audible. And she reads it. She has some other stars reading it with her, but primarily she reads it. And I really want to focus on the chapter, sorry, sorry, sorry. That's how she says it in the book. Because that was the big tearjerker moment for me. I think I was on the subway when I was listening to it, and I was just crying in the subway, and very embarrassing. And then, of course, when I was re-listening to it for this record, I thought, I probably won't cry again. And, and then sure enough, I get to the end, and I'm sitting at my desk, like, like wiping the tears off. Anyway, this particular chapter is... Overall, it's about Amy Poehler. She makes a mistake and she doesn't own up to it. Somebody calls her on it. Eventually, she owns up to it and apologizes. And it's very introspective. And I'll give you a synopsis. On SNL, she was in a skit. The gist of it was she was playing Dakota Fanning and having a grown-up talk show that was very highbrow and intellectual for young Dakota Fanning. Ellen Page was a guest on the show, and at some point...
Playing Miley Cyrus.
Ellen Page... Oh, yeah, that's right, yeah. Ellen Page brings out a doll, and Dakota Fanning says, oh, yeah, I have a doll, too. It's from Hurricane Mary. It's about severely disabled sisters, and the doll is just kind of messed up looking. Amy didn't write the skit, and she hadn't seen the doll prior to going on. But when she said that when she pulled it out, she felt kind of bad.
And she also didn't know that it was based on real people.
So she's just assuming this is So she's just assuming that this is just something the writers came up with, and but she has a little kind of like a lurking bad feeling, especially because of how the doll is depicted, and I think in the skit she says they're kind of play acting with the dolls and. She says, oh, I can't play because I'm severely disabled, and it's a joke. So anyway, the skit goes on, everything's fine, and a few days, maybe a week or so later, she gets a letter from the actor Chris Cooper and his wife, Marianne Cooper, criticizing her for, expressing their disappointment about her part in this and making fun of disabled people, and they say Hurricane Mary is a real documentary about two sisters, and Amy Poehler had no idea it was actually like a real thing. And one of the sisters, Anastasia Somoza, was a big Hillary Clinton fan, and she had been watching that night because Hillary Clinton was on that night, and so the sister, Anastasia Somoza, had been watching her basically being made fun of. Amy Poehler, her reaction is instead to say that she's sorry, she gets kind of angry and defensive and tells everybody around her about the letter and says, I didn't know about it, and, I can't believe these people are angry at me, and so she never apologizes. And then the years go by and she just feels kind of bad about it. It kind of eats at her a little bit. And then it gets brought up like 5 years later. She's having dinner with Spike Jonze. He's, reminds her that it's never too late to apologize. And he puts her back in touch with Marianne and Chris Cooper. So anyway, Amy reaches out. She finally apologizes. In her apology, she does sort of remind them. She reads her apology, in the book, and in the apology, she says, like, I didn't know that they were real people, and I hadn't seen the doll prior. And she sort of criticizes her own apology a little bit because she was kind of overly defending herself, I guess, instead of completely owning up to it. She gets a letter back from Anastasia Somoza, one of the sisters. And so Anastasia Somoza, she has cerebral palsy and spastic quadriplegia. And you may remember her. She was at the Democratic National Convention this year. She was one of the featured speakers, and she's been stumping for Hillary Clinton. And she gave a wonderful speech, very moving. And she's just this very inspiring young woman. And she writes back to Amy just this very gracious, acceptance of the apology. She points out, why it was hurtful in the first place, because it wasn't so much personally for her, but just that she's been fighting to have just broader acceptance in society of disability, and not show that it's something to be made fun of or ostracized in that way. So I start getting the waterworks when Amy reads Anastasia's acceptance, just because she's so gracious and, just like I said, an inspiring person. And I think that this chapter shows it shows why this is such a good memoir, because it just shows this level of introspection that Amy has, coming to terms with realizing that she's made a mistake, and just the process of going through that, her guilt and what she does with that. And I just think it's one of the most important things we can do, is to realize when we've made a mistake, realize that we didn't recognize that for 5 years maybe, but still reach out to somebody, as hard as that can be. Apologize from the heart. Don't say things like, if I offended you in any way, which are the sort of non-apology apologies we see a lot these days. Anastasia forgiving her, it's just sort of it's just such a nice, touching human moment that I don't think we go through often enough these days. It's something we sweep aside a lot. Did you guys read it or listen to it?
I listened to just that chapter that you sent us. So, yeah, I listened to it. I thought it was really interesting, and I got a lot of what you got out of it. I didn't cry because I'm a rock. I'm an emotionalist.
That's okay. I think, again, I think it's not... I think this tearjerker theme is interesting because it's interesting to see what makes different people cry.
And I think, too, it was one of those things that it also, a good human interest story should also make you reflect on your own life and experiences, and draw parallels or understand the differences and how far their path has gone from yours, and sort of either understand their path or like see how far can a human go beyond where you've gone, or how low can a person go beneath where you've gone, is sort of like, those are the things that memoirs can give you. And also, like, how to the core can someone act and show you like a reflection of yourself, and reflecting on that as themselves kind of show you that, you also should be reflective and introspective at times. And what, this is something like when we were younger, you do a lot of like crude jokes and insult comedy and sort of rude humor. And she talks about that, like being, she's made fun of everything and everyone. And it's more about like the problem wasn't the joke. The problem was the sticking to her guns after the joke and not getting it off of, like, that was part of it for her. It was like not getting it off of her soul. And really one of her foibles was the fact that she just let it, like she kept making excuses for it for herself. Like that's what I kind of took from it was it's the jokes get made. It's not so much like, oh, it's not a call for political correctness or some craziness, like she's not using those terms, but at the same time, it's sort of like, this is why in the UK, you can't say spastic in the UK because it's a derogatory term. It's like saying we're trying to mothball the term retarded in the United States, in our terminology for the same reasons, where we're already insensitive enough to a certain class of people, and whatever we can do societally to recognize those people and recognize where they're at is good. And so if you're making jokes about that and using those terms, it's important to understand what those terms mean and do if you're going to use them. Like it's like knowing the weapons you wield. If you're a comic or an insult comic or a satirist or whatever, it's important to know what your tools are. And when you're younger and a little more like brash and shock value-tastic, you tend to like wield these weapons and hurt people because you don't really understand like the weight of them. And, to stretch this analogy, you're just kind of swinging wildly and not really getting that people are getting hurt because you don't understand the like full impact of how this thing is used or flung. And the reaction tends to be what hers is to become very defensive about it and be like, well, no, it's not me. It's not my fault, blah, blah. And so that I connected very strongly to those things because, as you get older, you start to look back and you say, hey, I acted in these ways, and, you just become more aware of how you speak and the jokes that you make. And when you say something that could be taken as insensitive, you have to be aware of like how you're doing it, why you're doing it, and that like, it can't just be like a chuckle behind your hand, like insensitive, like casual racism or some crazy thing. It has to be done deliberately and with a bit of a purpose, because you have to understand the import of the weight of the thing that you're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I listened, so I ended up listening to the whole audiobook because I was, working on some mindless stuff and needed something to listen to anyways, and it was fun for the most part. Yeah, I was kind of surprised that it was like a comedy book, a comedian's biography as a tearjerker pick. I thought that was sort of odd, but it was a specific chapter, and I did get misty-eyed listening to the chapter, and I think a lot of it was what you talked about, was more... For me, it was less about what Amy was going through, although that was very relatable. But it's not momentous. It's the kind of anecdote that, like, in everyday life is sort of less interesting. But once you are someone of more influence, and you're making fun of someone else who's on the public stage who also has influence, like, it's sort of like that smaller slight becomes magnified, and that's why that's part of what makes it a bigger deal in the story.
Yeah.
And
she's also punching down.
Yeah.
Because even though the one woman has the woman who's being sort of insulted has a platform, Amy Poehler's platform is coming from the societal norm, and so it's
is bigger.
And she's coming from an area of privilege.
Yeah. And so it's like. So I think some of it was for Amy to accept that role. But it was in the end, like, it was the graciousness and the, intelligence of her response, that made you understand, like, oh, like, this is why this person is so special. You know what I mean? And this is why she's in the public eye, because she's an incredible person. It's like, it doesn't have any, like, it's sort of like the fact that she's handicapped is what gave her in some ways, like, an opportunity, and she just, like, was able to be awesome with it.
Right.
And the graciousness of her response is just what got me, tearing up a little. I wasn't bawling, but definitely, a little misty-eyed.
Yeah.
And it was great. And overall, like, the book I really enjoyed the book overall. I thought it was. I think it was more personal and a little more insightful and a little less jokey than I expected. And it's more, she's kind of more like, like this is who I am and this is what I can share, and I think she was making an effort to, I mean, she does share kind of like just facts about her life and just things that you might be curious about her and things like that. And I think you kind of learn that she pretty much is who you think she is kind of what I ended up coming away with, which is pretty awesome, But it, because I also listened to the Bossy Pants audiobook, which is by her BFF,
Tina Fey.
And it was more, Bossy Pants was more what I expected. And this was a little bit warmer and a little bit more personal, and I thought a little bit more interesting, honestly, for that reason.
Yeah, I had the same reaction. I listened to several comedy memoirs around the same time. Bossy Pants, Mindy Kaling's first one, I don't remember what it's called. Mark Maron's, he had one too. And maybe somebody else I'm forgetting. And yeah, I found that Amy Poehler's, I mean, they're all great and fun, especially fun to listen to.
Yeah, they're great.
Because they're
all
read them.
They're all great audiobooks.
Yeah. But yeah, like you were saying, I think Amy Poehler's is the most like personal and, has some actual advice that I could take to heart in it,
Yeah, and it's not like, she's not gonna like blow you away with like revelations or anything like that, but it's like, it's a fun listen, it's casual, but you still do like still does make you, as John was saying, like reflect on your own life in a lot of cases, and in part because it's a lot of it is more like mundane, and I think also because she is in a creative field, like there are parallels that I could relate to just as John did, in smaller ways. So yeah, it was fun. I would recommend it, and you only really get teared up during that one chapter. So the rest of it's more upbeat.
Yeah, and there's there's still funny parts, and if you get the Audible version, then you get Seth Meyers and
it's also not like you tear up, but it's not sad. You know what I mean?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, you're right.
It's more like moving.
Yeah, that's true.
What would you guys parallel to other, like, when have you had experiences similar to this where you're moved and so you get a little teary or misty?
I think that like on many podcasts, on many episodes of This American Life, on several, and on many of the storytelling podcasts like The Moth, and like there's a bunch of other ones like, and like what's the other great one? It's where it's a organization, nonprofit that records just people's lives and edits them into stories.
StoryCorps?
Yeah, StoryCorps, and like I said, many others have those kind of moments that kind of move you and get you a little choked up.
Or that one letter that they read in the Civil War documentary.
No, those don't get me.
Dearest Silent.
Does that choke you up?
I probably got a lump in my throat when I first saw that. That's a pretty emotional moment. There's a few emotional moments in that documentary series.
The Ken Burns Civil War documentary.
That's one where the format it's just a little too
he did a lot of work. I mean, it's taking an event that never happened and making it seem like there was ever a Civil War.
No, I mean, he did an amazing job at giving.
Welcome to the Civil War deniers. Yeah, I'm trying to think of other
I've definitely been moved to tears out of happiness before, frequently in movies and TV shows. I'm just struggling to come up with an exact instance right now.
From happiness, wow.
Happiness?
Yeah, I guess I've experienced
happiness?
More kind of squeals of joy type of things.
Well, if
from TV shows.
if romantic partners are reunited or things like that, that'll somebody comes back from a war.
Or back from the future.
You think somebody's dead, but they're not. Stuff like that. That'll definitely get me.
Getcha.
Yeah, I'm just realizing the more I think and talk about this, I'm just like a total sap when it comes to movies and TV shows.
Yeah,
I'm just that happens to me a lot. Yeah, and I'm a total sucker for romantic comedies for that reason. I totally get into them, but I let myself get into them. You know what I mean? And I totally have those moments when when they get back together or whatever, and I'm like, oh, squeal, or whatever. And then total dope.
Yeah, and I usually, I guess I go back to the series stuff where if it's a TV series, if it's something, or a longer documentary series or reality, cinema verite type series, if it's something where you're with the characters or with the people for a long time, and things, you're watching their lives change or watching them like sometimes it's also just like the whole, like an ending can be pretty like cathartic.
Yeah.
And like either joyful tears or like sad, you're closing the chapter on this thing and walking away from it. And sometimes, it's I'm only just thinking of it, even though it's not particularly emotional to me, but that, the end of Lord of the Rings,
Right.
where they're all kind of like, they're getting on the boat and they're saying goodbye to one another for like, he's never going to see Sam again. And they just had you've had a huge journey with them. And they have a huge journey, and now there's a split. Like Sam's going to go back and run the Shire into the ground.
Is this in the book or the movie?
In the book.
Okay.
But in the movie, they really amped it up.
But it makes you cry in the movie.
No.
It made you cry in the book.
No,
Yeah, I think in the book I maybe teared up more. Just because, again, it's like they're saying goodbye forever to their world. Like, it's also an aspect of like magic leaving the world in that one, because like Gandalf and a lot of the elves are kind of like going off into, so it's like the world's turning a chapter. And I guess I'm saying that's like an example. You see that in a number of things where especially in longer series, you've had all this time with these characters, and you've seen an epoch, like you've seen like a massive change in the world. That's why they're having this book series, because there's some massive event occurring in the world. And then it's when it's usually a combination of all kinds of different things. Like in Harry Potter, there's like countless deaths and there's these major shifts, and you're stepping away from even though they kind of show the like little epilogue for the characters, that's it. Like you're done with these. You don't get to read any more of these characters. Mm-hmm. And yes, they'll write umpteen books, but really like this is the story is intended, and now you're going to close the chapter on them, and you can always go back, but that's it. Like the journey's over. And so there's also like a sense of loss to some degree, which is also cathartic because there's a sense of completion. And so there's something like you've traveled a road and you've chosen to read this book. And that's something that, when you're in it, when you're doing that in your own life, except for like true endings where you go to a funeral or a momentous occasion like a graduation, or something where this is a terminus point with a highlighter like circling it. Usually those things just happen to you and you can look back on them, and it's rare that you can actually be in the moment and that they're celebrated or punctuated in a way that you can actually reflect on them.
You wish the music would swell, and things would slow down for a moment, and that's what life is missing.
Soundtracks in slow motion.
That's right. And proper editing.
But yeah, are there other like autobiographical things or biographical things that kind of make you misty?
I listened to Felicia Day's memoir. Forget what it's called.
I didn't know she wrote a memoir.
Yeah, it's called I think You're Never Weird on the Internet. It came out last year, I think. And there's a moment in there that gets me teary, and I think it's also a positive moment. It's when Felicia Day is like an internet celebrity, and she had a lot of support from her parents, but it sounded like her dad never really like got it, and then she's at a mall or somewhere with him, and then somebody recognizes her and gets really giddy, and she talks to them and they're really excited, and that's when her dad like really like gets it, like, oh, like you're really doing something with this. And that it was, I'm not describing it very well, I don't remember it very well, but it got me.
I get the scene.
Yeah, it got me teary. I forget exactly how he reacted. He reacted in a way that was very emotional, and she was like, oh yes, he.
Yeah, and whenever you get dads to emote, it's like, whoa!
Yeah.
Holy crap!
So yeah, Jules, what about you? Any autobiographical or biographical series that?
I've been racking my brain, but nothing's come to mind at this moment. But again, I just haven't read that many.
Now, what about? All right, so let's go back to like, what about real life events? Are there things that, like, not in a narrative, like things that you are actually experiencing in terms of not so much like personal heartbreak or something, but like, do you, the trope is people, I always cry at weddings. Is that something that you've ever found yourself doing?
Yeah, I've definitely gotten swept up in the emotions at weddings, especially when it's a like close friend of mine, and especially when other people are also crying. But I think like when it's a close friend or family member, and they're genuinely happy, and the relation and you feel good about their relationship, and they're both so moved, then I get very moved by that, and I get very misty-eyed during those situations.
Especially if they have good, well-written vows.
Yeah.
That helps.
But it doesn't even matter what they say. It's like more like, again, the emotions they're like feeling or whatever. Yeah, and you definitely get that sense too, that like when it's people who are like well loved and well surrounded, like you kind of like there's kind of this feeling in the room that everybody's rooting for them, everybody loves them, and it's like a big love fest, and you just like just takes you over.
But that is a level of, it's like a narrative thing, a wedding. Like you're sort of watching this thing being performed for you, it's kind of weird.
But what's crazy is that it works. It's
right,
like it's and it's sort of like you I think in a way you kind of you need that to give yourself permission to kind of exit real life or to, because I feel like normal, like the day-to-day society culture kind of asks you to repress emotion and those kinds of things, and propriety and stuff. You're not supposed to get all gushy on people all the time because it makes people uncomfortable. And so it's sort of like the ceremony and the rituals allow people to do that. And I think if anything, we sort of like could use a bit more of that in our culture, because it kind of like a lot of it was a lot of the old ceremonial stuff we've let go of, like also had a lot of baggage. And like sometimes I wish we had a little bit more of like, we need some new stuff
to fill those
voids.
To
fill that void. Because like it's like like there's not, especially because people don't get married as often as they do. People don't die as much as they used to. Like, you need like a little more drama in life.
Right. I guess too, like they've been to some family reunions where someone will give like a speech, and you'll see, as long as it's not like you're not cringing waiting for like someone to say something racist or something, it's more
that
like
can also be very emotional.
But they're definitely like, they're heartfelt moments. Like there's a tradition on my mom's side of the family where they have tea parties where someone like has turned 20 or 30 or 40 or whatever. It's a tea party, and it's an occasion like during a family reunion. You'll give a little, like someone will get roasted and toasted if they've recently had a tea or had a tea that year, and so it creates like a benchmark and a reason for people to kind of, even though it's not their birthday, to like celebrate them in this moment that they've come together. And so people will say heartfelt stuff, and you'll get that swelling in your chest or lump in your throat kind of thing, and that can be very nice. And there are occasional, like there are definitely like there's some goodbyes that can also get me misty, where it's like like I don't know when I'll see my grandmother again alive, like so I'm saying goodbye to her, and maybe this will be something I do a couple more times, but right now, when she's present and I'm saying goodbye, that's something where it catches in my throat, and I'm very careful about that. And so it's sort of like at the funeral or whatever that I go to eventually, hopefully I get to go to that, and I'm not she's not going to mine or something, but I don't know what I'm saying, but that basically, like I haven't been to many funerals as an adult. Like you actually tend, like I've been to funerals as a child more than I've been to funerals as an adult.
Yeah, because we're like kind of in between right now.
Yeah, so like I've been to like older grandparents and great grandparents' funerals, but I haven't been to a funeral in a very long time. And when you're younger, you don't really get the import or the impact. You haven't spent as much. You're immortal. You don't know anything about time.
Right.
And this whole, you may have just learned about death, and you don't have the decades long connection that your parents have, or your grandparents or whatever, or aunts and uncles, to the person that you're celebrating. So you're running around and eating cake and, being the other side of life, and they're celebrating the end of it. So it's sort of like getting close to that threshold where we're going to see that next step. That's something like I want to, I'll see how I react. I mean, maybe like you're saying, a similar sort of ceremony of celebration of passing, but there are interim moments that again, I think reunions can build, and that sort of goodbyes are part of when you know, get everyone and the family together and you're saying a goodbye. It's about those moments.
And it just creates that space where it's like, it's okay to do this now. Like, it's appropriate. Everybody's doing it, you know, like, go for it, you know? So it's like, yeah. I mean, I did, you know, like, experience, you know, like my grandparents have all passed. So, you know, I've been to a few of those funerals, and, you know, it's definitely, it's good. It's good to have those rituals, to have, you know, those transitions, because I think we all need help with that.
Tearjerkeriums where we can just go after lunch.
That's
and
right.
ride for a while. Like the Roman tearjerkeriums. What about you, Mary? Can you think of other like events or?
Well, when I leave my parents at the airport, we usually get misty, even though we know we might see each other in another 3 or 4 months. That's always, there's something about saying goodbye at an airport.
Yeah.
It's just so depressing.
Yeah, airports. Well, and like so you know, like my parents were divorced from when I was little, and they lived, like my mother lived in France and my dad in the U.S. So I was constantly, you know, a couple times a year having to do that. Like, I'm not gonna see you for 8 months, and I'm saying goodbye at the airport, and I'm getting on the plane by myself.
Oh yeah, that's terrible.
Yeah, I have a lot of saying goodbye to my parents in those situations is always tough, and I think like and airports suck.
Yeah.
And they're just getting worse all the time.
Yeah.
Well, it's all the tears everywhere. They erode the environment.
I have a
so much
picture.
mist in the air.
I have a picture of my brother who's much younger than me, and this is pre 9/11. I'm going off to college for the first time, leaving my mom and my brother. My dad is stationed out of the country, so my mother and my young brother, I don't know how old he was, 4 or 5 at the time, maybe. Probably getting that totally wrong. We're just like all alone in Alabama, and I'm going off to college. And so it's pre 9/11, so they can go in to the gate with me. Mm-hmm. And after I left and I'm already on the plane, my mom took a picture of my brother standing in front of the window where, you know, my plane is just beyond outside. And he just has the saddest expression, and it's just so sad.
Puppy dog sad.
So you're like reminding him, be like, remember when you loved me?
Yeah. I should. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because that brought by some other memories. Like there were a few times where like I got on the plane, but then the plane was delayed. Like we had to be on the tarmac for like 2 hours or something. So they let me back off the plane. And then I hung out with so I can hang out with my dad for a couple more hours, and we were playing games. And then, like, we, like, went away from the terminal because it was too noisy or something. And, like, we almost, like, we missed the call, and I almost missed the plane. They have to, like, pull the plane back and reopen the door so I can get on it.
Wow.
But it just reminds me how much...
That's something they wouldn't even do nowadays.
No. Yeah. Yeah, it's like, it was so much more fluid back then and so much more relaxed. Now that's why it like doubly sucks, because it's like on top of, you know, all the emotional goodbyes and all that stuff, you're on top of that, you're dealing with all this like crappy security stuff. Yeah, crap.
We should have we should have airport parties that are just like fun. Everyone's gone through their they have their TSA pre-approval badge, so they can like go to the party center, hang out in the terminal. They don't need a ticket.
Yeah, we wouldn't get in any trouble for that. No problem.
Yeah. So where can people listen to Yes Please?
You can find it on Audible. I believe you can find it on Amazon. You can also get it on Kindle, or you can buy a paper book.
Yeah, although we can't guarantee you'll get misty-eyed reading the book. We don't know about that.
That's true. Yeah.
That would be a good experiment. Maybe if Keith hasn't listened to it yet, maybe he can be our guy. Read it.
That's
Make
true.
him read
Maybe,
it.
Yeah.
No, you have to read it.
It's your punishment.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mary, for the pick. That was a good pick.
You're welcome.
Do you have any last thoughts? Any advice for people? I want to listen to the rest of the book. I only listened to the Sorry chapter.
My advice to people is to examine any mistakes you may have made in your life and see if you need to apologize for them and apologize for them.
Nice.
Or if you need to forgive somebody, do it.
but remind them about why they were wrong when you make them forget.
That's right.
Or just if you're feeling angry about something or defensive, ask yourself why.
So in terms of these, just one last little question, in terms of these type of biographies or autobiographies, would you recommend, like, is this a good entryway if someone hasn't listened to these kind before?
Sure. I mean, you know, I'm already a fan of Amy Poehler. I wouldn't say I'm a super duper fan, but I like Parks and Recreation, and I've, you know, watched Saturday Night Live off and on throughout the years. You know, if you're interested in any of those things. I mean, it's highly entertaining as an audiobook just because, and a lot of these are just because she reads it. Whoever, you know, Tina Fey reads hers, Mindy Kaling reads hers.
And would you recommend reading them or listening to them over reading them?
Well, I haven't read them. I've only listened to them, so I can't really compare them. But if you are somebody who likes to listen to things at all or likes podcasts, I mean, I know some people are just, they don't like to listen to books because they're more visual. So if you're not one of those people, I would say listen to it. I recommend it.
Yeah, and I think even if you are somebody who typically prefers reading the book, I think these are just great audiobooks because they're performers. They read it themselves, and
it's their memoir.
And I think they even, like in Yes Please, she even adds a lot. Like the final chapter, she read live in front of an audience at you know, like one of the improv theaters she helped found. And, you know, that gives it a totally different vibe. And you know, she brings in a lot of special guests, and there's additional banter that I'm sure is not in the books and stuff like that. So, and it's just like, I think it's great, easy listening, you know. I think a lot of the reasons I often don't like audiobooks is if they're kind of dense or there's a lot to keep track of, I find that harder to do in audio format. Whereas this one, it's a lot like a radio program. It's very easy to follow and light fare. So I would highly recommend the audiobooks for those types of books.
Agree.
Cool. So Mary, thank you. So Yes Please, find it on audio on Audible, iTunes, probably most places where you can find audiobooks, and on paper in your local bookstore or
library.
Amazon, your library.
Or you can have your mom read it to you. That's also good.
Doing her Amy Poehler
Or if you
impression.
know Amy Poehler, maybe you can ask her to read it to you.
Oh, that would be extra good.
Hey there. I'm sorry, okay? But can I say something? Look, I admit I wasn't perfect. No one is perfect. That's a fact. Speaking of facts, don't you think we all need to take a minute and decide who is right and who is wrong? Every side is different. It's just that my side seems more right. I'm not just saying that because it's my side. I think a lot of other people would agree with me if given the chance. If I upset you in some way, please know that wasn't my intention.
Such a question, there are many possible answers, such as hard work.
Years ago, the Holy
Feel I'm alone in this whole of existence. I know it takes time, but I'm losing my persistence. The distance is too far to fetch. So
Hey everybody, thanks for listening to another episode of the New to You Show. I was one of your hosts, John Holt. You can find me on Twitter at Lord Joho, and you can find me on Instagram at BoredGhost, BORED_GHOST. Mary, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter, Instagram at Mary Varn.
All right, Jules, where can people find you?
You can find me on Twitter, Instagram at Beautiful Jules, and that's JULES, Jules.
All right, and Jules, before we wrap out of here, what's new to you this week?
New to me this week is Westworld, the HBO series.
What?
Yeah.
Westworld? Michael cried?
After many recommendations, and I was kind of curious about it, but from the trailers and stuff, my hopes were not very high, but it has way exceeded my expectations, and I'm totally hooked, and I think it's awesome. Like, it's one of the best shows I've seen in a long time. Like, it's just super, super interesting, and it's like creating a really interesting world at the end. I'm frustrated because I've already caught up, and now I have to wait for a new episode every week like all the other suckers.
Yeah, that's why one criticism that it's not on Netflix or
yes,
Hulu.
Exactly.
Just watch the whole thing.
HBO sticking to the week-by-week release. I mean, I think partly because they're still on a cable network. And I think there is this, you know, idea out there that, you know, if you dole it out week to week, you keep the the water cooler office banter going where, you know, people can, so you keep the conversation going. Yeah. Which, I think there is some truth to that, because if it's released all at once and not... sometimes they just catch fire and everybody binge watches them all within the first month. But there are shows that sort of end up in between that, the ones that take longer to catch on, I think can suffer from being released all at once in terms of the buzz. But as a viewer, it's frustrating. It definitely feels like something I want to binge watch.
Now, did you watch the original motion picture or Future World?
I did watch the... I think I have watched the original film. I don't think I ever really sat down and watched it. I think it was... we worked at video stores for a long time. I think it's been on, and I've kind of half watched it. So I've never really watched it, and I did not read the original book. And I'm curious to see, the series, it seems to be really a fresh take, but I'm curious to know how much it has in common with the book.
Well, Crichton had, if you look at the credits, he had worked in development on trying to make a Westworld show prior to that, for a while back, in the maybe 80s or 90s.
Interesting.
Before he passed away. So it couldn't have been recently.
Oh, I didn't even realize he passed away.
I don't know, maybe he didn't. Did I make that up? I thought he did.
No, he might have. I just didn't know that.
I thought he had.
We'll confirm.
Googling.
Okay, Google. Crichton.
Yeah, so he had been... So it's based on his attempts at development?
I think so, I was looking at IMDb because I was researching it a little bit, and it looks like he had done some development at one point. What does it say, Mary?
He died in 2008.
All right. So yeah.
Did you read the original book?
No, I just watched the movie.
Gotcha. And how did the original movie compare?
It's pretty different. It's almost like there's the Ed Harris character, the Man in Black.
Yeah.
That's kind of the villain. He's the villain in the other one, but he's not. He's a robot.
Gotcha.
He's the one that goes bad. He's Yul Brynner.
And I thought it was really
he goes bad.
Smart to switch that to have sort of the
So I'm really enjoying Westworld too. So we're 4 episodes in right now at the time of this recording. By the time this show comes out, maybe you listener can binge watch it because all the episodes may be out by then.
If you can, you're so lucky.
Yeah. But as of these 4 episodes in, even though I really like the show a lot, really enjoying it, one thing that's really bothering me, maybe it's intentional and I'm not sure, is that they've only shown people straight dudes and gay women having sex with women.
They've implied that that guys are getting it on, but it's not as explicit. They kind of show it. So I'm pretty sure there's a point where a couple episodes in, or maybe it's the second episode, they introduce sort of the white hat, black hat, this guy and his soon to be brother-in-law kind of thing on this sort of last excursion to the park before he gets married to the guy's sister or something. And the one guy they sort of imply is bisexual because he goes off with a man and woman right off the train. And then in the brothel, they show him with a couple women and a man in bed.
I mean,
but it's definitely more breasts and explicit stuff.
I mean, part of it might be intentional in that I think they're sort of showing look at all these guys who come in and rape and pillage, and they're sort of showing this hyper masculine fantasy in a way on purpose.
It's also they're also creating a world that fits within Western tropes, which again are hyper masculine.
But I just
damsel in distress.
Women on women stuff.
But I just feel like the James Marsden character. I mean, he's this beautiful man, and I just feel like a straight woman going into this, he would be the fantasy. He's not a real man who is threatening. Mm-hmm. He's this fantasy cowboy, upstanding.
That good guy saving the damsel.
Yeah, handsome. But he's in love with this other girl, and he's not going to have sex with any of the real people. So what's the point?
That's true. I mean, there are so far we have seen a few female guests to the park, but they have been kind of more with somebody or hangers on. There hasn't been,
they've had sex with
there's a woman who has a she's a side character.
Yeah.
She's kind of taken upstairs by one of the robot or replicant sex workers,
and
the brothel.
There's also like there's also a scene that implied that one of the women who works behind the scenes like is kind of into like some of the robot ladies. There was a scene that
specifically
implied
into
that.
the ladies.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely like you get straight sex with men. It's really like basically the women robots being used for sex, not the men robots.
Yeah, it is true. So far, it is very like it does seem to be like more aimed at the male gaze type of thing. But it's strange because like I was pleasantly surprised to see that the like head of the showrunner is a woman.
Oh, cool. Yeah, no,
because I watched some of the behind the scenes stuff.
I mean, I'm hoping it'll just unfold, and like I said, we're 4 episodes in to it.
And definitely every episode, I mean, that's part of what I love about it. Every episode is just peeling a new layer. And you know, like and I mean, the other thing that I love is that it's created this like vast yet totally insular world.
Yeah.
And you have no idea what's going on outside of that world. And there's just vague implications. And, you know, it's the future, so it could be anything.
Yeah.
And you're also only seeing, you know, like a small, like mega rich strata of that world coming into the park. So it's like, I just love how many open questions there are.
And they even hinted it with like, our cold storage is also like, it's either like a buried other part of the park that we had like buried a while ago because there's just like old escalators, or this is like an old mall that we've just it's been buried after years of detritus, and we've excavated and are using it as a cold storage.
And I think they totally shot that in an abandoned mall.
But yeah, I also wonder like where in the Southwest are they? There's some beautiful shots of canyons.
Well, also, is any of it real? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like,
but they have that shot on the train where they're pulling up, and they have these beautiful shots of like areas that are probably national parks in real life or something.
It could be Compton.
Right, that's the thing. Like, you don't know how much of it is a construct and how much it's not. Like, you don't know like how, like maybe that
digitally,
maybe that park itself, maybe that whole landscape is underground. Like,
oh well, Mary's also
like,
saying like in terms of real life location.
Oh,
well, yeah.
I see.
Like, are they co-opting these national parks? You know, and have they co-opted a national park like the Grand Canyon and turned it into this or something?
Probably some parts of it. Yeah, I bet you they shoot all over. Like, but yeah, I'd be curious to know more behind the scenes. But
no. I mean real location in the show. Too.
Okay.
I mean real location in the show. Like maybe it is all a construct, or maybe in the show in the future, this corporation has taken over beautiful areas that we normally wouldn't let a big corporation take over.
Turn national parks into
And I mean, there is a lot in the show and about the whole idea and the whole organization that you definitely have to suspend your disbelief. Like, there are a lot of things about like the way the behind the scenes stuff operates that's kind of ludicrous. Right. I mean, even just the way the rooms look and stuff, it's kind of silly. And the way the robots get fabricated seems ridiculous and things like that.
Well, they're like 3D printed.
Yeah. But like as soon as the character stuff begins, like you quickly are like, whatever, like, sure, like I'll accept this. And, you know, it just like eases you into it. I mean, it's early enough too in the show that I know that, you know, it could be another Battlestar Galactica where it starts strong and then it's just gonna like
peter out,
lose its way and just end up being totally ridiculous. But I'm hopeful it'll stay this good. But
there are some devices I like that they're using. They use it very heavily in the first one. Like they use the
fly.
There's the flies are really good, but also the player piano.
Yes.
And they use it to show like it's sort of like your Groundhog's Day alarm clock. Is this player's piano, where it turning on and the new song starting. And usually the songs are like jukebox style, where it's like a cover of a Radiohead track.
Yeah, and that's the other reminder.
Like a player piano thing.
That is one critique. Like in the not the what do you call that when there's sound that's supposed to be in the film versus anyways,
sound on tape or whatever.
Yeah, in the actual soundtrack for the show, they do that where they'll orchestrate an act, like they've done that twice already, where they orchestrate a famous pop song as the swell, like the emotional music for the show, and I found that super distracting. But maybe it's kind of reflecting that that's happening. I mean, I could sort of accept it in that way.
I think
but
the way I was seeing, if it is the far future, and it's sort of like if things are so like there's no difference between the entertainer and Radiohead's like Karma Police when you're collapsing
fine.
time, so you're 500 years away.
Yeah, no,
from
that makes sense. No, but it's just not on the score of the show. That's just for the audience.
They're using that as well.
Yeah, like they used like Painted Black, or no, is it Painted Black by by the Rolling Stones, and they used some other like pop song, and just as a score for the show, and I found that super annoying.
I mean,
I don't know why.
Yeah, I guess the way I was seeing it is sort of like misappropriate, like, or misread time signals.
Right.
Like,
It kind of reflects what's going on in the park, but I still didn't like it.
What'd you think about the intro? Me and Mary had talked about this a little bit.
I'm not a fan. I don't know what it is, but it's both the score. I'm not a big fan of the score in general. Mm-hmm. And I also just like, even though the visuals are kind of pretty and stuff, they just don't do it for me. I think also it just like, I feel like I've kind of seen that sort of thing too many times. It's starting to feel like a trope.
Yeah, that's what you're saying, right, Mary? That
I'm trying to find, what's the HBO show that Matthew McConaughey was in?
Oh, True Detective.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah,
it's pretty. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so I think that if True Detective had never happened, maybe this would be really cool. Or I feel like True Detective was one of the first that did this kind of title sequence really well, and since then everybody's just been trying to be like True Detective. I mean, this has a lot of imagery that isn't like True Detective, but True Detective has a sort of like
extreme close-ups, semi-CG.
and superimposing images.
I think it's also just the fact that they're both insanely long.
Yeah, that's
like,
true. You're right.
Indulgently long. Like this one is like clocks in at over. It's like a minute and a half.
I wonder if that's coming because like what people love, it's got a lot of macro. Is the Game of Thrones intro that looks like it's been fabricated, and it's that sort of like feel.
I think the imagery is really cool.
But the Game of Thrones opener contributes to the story. You know what I mean?
It tells you where the map, like it maps the world.
Because there's so much to keep track of in that show, and it reminds you, and it changes per episode, and it only goes to the locations that are going to be featured.
And the theme song's amazing.
No, it's true. I mean, I do really like the theme song. So I think that's why, and I think it's just also just more interesting. Whereas here, it's a lot more abstract, and I mean, again, maybe some of the symbolism of it might become more interesting over time, but I just find it overlong and kind of boring.
Yeah, the Game of Thrones one is very focused. It's one thing. It's a map that you're going in and out of. But this is a bunch of images, like all these title sequences are. Now, some of the images are really cool. The 3D printing stuff is really cool.
Yeah.
And I like that a lot.
But I guess for me, too, it's stuff, like you're saying, we've seen before. Like, it's the Chris Cunningham Bjork video.
Yeah.
Meets, like, 3D printers, meets your True Detective, like, extreme close-up stuff. And it's skillfully done. Like, if you want to see a bad version of this kind of stuff, look at the new Luke Cage show's opener, where it's a very, like, Daredevil was okay, but kind of on the same fringe, where it's like 3D models up close, like fake particle-y paint stuff.
Yeah.
And Luke Cage is just bad. Like bad, like close-up projection stuff like True Detective, and it's just a bad carbon copy of something that we've seen 10 times too many.
Honestly, like I wouldn't have commented on it so much if it was just like, like 20 seconds long.
Yeah.
But like it's almost a minute and a half. It's like, come on, guys.
Yeah, it feels indulgent.
You're begging for people to skip it.
Yeah, it feels really indulgent, and it's also just it's like too late. Like I'm sympathetic to the makers of it. I'm sure they're very talented and everything, but it's just I think this would have been really cool 2 or 3 years ago, but it's too,
almost we've
seen it too much, and making it so long is too indulgent.
Yeah, it seems like you'd almost want like the first one to be the long title sequence over the factory, like actually like practical production of these monsters, these robots. And then from there on in, you're just like Westworld. Like that's, the logo and a tone, and you're done. You're into the show.
Yeah. But, But I think it's also like kind of become an HBO thing. They're going to have the cool title sequence.
Right.
I mean, I think when you love a show, the title sequence kind of becomes like, it becomes this like kind of Pavlovian response where when you hear that theme song or you see that opener, you're like, oh, getting excited, and you're like, yeah. But this one just misses the mark where I'm just like, I can't wait to skip this and get to the show.
They should have just done it Game of Thrones, like exactly, but just be like canyons and like it's Westworld.
Yeah, and I mean, what's true about that show is they are kind of like unfolding the storylines, and I feel like if you made it had created the opening as a series as hinting at all these hidden storylines, so that Siri got activated there, and that it unfolded the story, that it gave you hints of all these storylines, so that as the show revealed more, you understood more of the opener. I think that would be cool.
Like that it was sort of a little puzzle, an enigma box to be unfolded.
Exactly, because there is a lot of symbols in the show and a lot of iconography, but maybe they may not have, maybe it's one of those shows where they hadn't written it all, but when they needed to make the thing.
Making the thing. Yeah, it's just sort of generic, like cool stuff, and then intercut with just like generic-y stuff and sort of blatant stuff.
But for sure, they've created like a cool sandbox to play in, and I can't wait to see what they come up with. And just the character stuff, the dialogue, and plus the whole typical like, the rich questions of AI versus human and what makes us human and not, and all that stuff. It's just such great. It's themes I love, so I'm just eating it up.
All right. So you can find that show on HBO, Westworld.
Yep. And you can probably buy it on iTunes. No, you might not be able to.
Probably not.
You might have to wait a year to buy it on iTunes.
Really, they don't do season passes or anything for HBO shows?
Not they didn't used to. Maybe that's changed, but it used to be you had to wait a year.
Now that you have to subscribe to HBO Go or Now or whatever.
Yeah.
That may be more the case. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you should also go check out the original movie, Yul Brynner's. It's really actually a pretty fun movie. It's good. Future World is much schlockier and kind of B-movie and weird.
Is it related?
Yeah, it's like the same world, similar kind of things. I mean,
is it a sequel?
Sorta. It's actually like so in Westworld there's sort of the futuristic wrapping, like we're in the future, and of the series, and Future, it's almost like the two combined a little bit, where like Future World is this sort of where everyone's living in the future and it's a space station and there's all these things, and Westworld's part of Future World is sort of like a little bit of the idea. But it's a lot of, in Westworld has this too, Crichton's idea that like science is going to dabble in things it doesn't understand sometimes, and like nature finds a way. It's Jurassic Park with robot people instead of dinosaurs.
Right.
So very similar themes for Crichton.
Oh yeah, that's true. Because I was comparing it to Jurassic Park, and I was like, oh yeah, they're both written by the same guy.
But yeah, so go check that out. Good show. Good new to you show pick, Jules. Thanks again, Mary, for your tearjerker. We'll be back next week with another tearjerker episode. Gang, you can find more about Yes Please and Westworld on our website, and our hosts, where you can contact them on our website at newtoyoushow.com. You can follow us on Twitter at newtoyoushow, and you should subscribe on iTunes, your favorite listening device, podcast device, and leave reviews and comments on your podcast device, and particularly in iTunes. Gang, it may not be new, but maybe it's new to you.
'Cause I'm sinking in the quicksand, been pedaling too long. And I'm not a human kickstand, need time to rest, but I gotta keep moving. This pitiful life is all about the music. 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 This pitiful life is all about the music.
With him together forever, without the limitation of time ever again. So the second coming of the Lord is not dead. They're two separate entities.